Welcome to another recorded live event supporting our most recent Living Resilience Introductory Course, Collateral Beauty. This course, designed to challenge and resource both newcomers and the very experienced in the Collapse-Aware and Collapse-Acceptant communities. Each recording in this series is from either the Saturday or Tuesday online Zoom gatherings intended to deepen an embodied and shared experience of this inner work of collapse in the course called Collateral Beauty. Hello there, and welcome to session 3 of the Saturday version of the group practice calls that we've set up to support this particular round of hopefully a group of folks will be ultimately participating together in this mostly recordings only course in the Living Resilience world called Collateral Beauty. Collateral Beauty is meant to be an introductory course to the Collapse-Acceptant and Collapse-Aware communities in the world, small and growing as they may be. And it is our intention that this coursework, even though it's called introductory, will be as useful, at least as useful, for folks who have been around for decades, years, decades in this conversation, as it will be, of course, for someone who's brand new to these critical conversations. So this is number 3. These past 2 Saturdays, we've covered the opening section and then section 1 of this course. And then last week, we talked about section 2 of this course. And I'm going to just do a very brief recap of a couple of the suggested, like if you all you could do is watch 1 or 2 videos, well, these are the ones we would recommend. So I'm just going to do a very quick recap and remind y'all what we've been talking about. And if you're brand new, if you're just checking into this course with us, then you can go back and review the Saturday and the Tuesday group practice calls. They've all been recorded and they're all in those sections that they're about. And I am just looking right now for, there we go. All right. So let me go back to section 1. And actually just before that was the Collateral Beauty, the Stages of Awareness and Course Context. This is pretty important for being just a simple little model, if you will, a way of looking at the world in these times by a guy named Paul Chefurka up in Canada. The Stages of Awareness model is something we've been using since day 1, which day 1 was about 10 years ago now that we've been offering this kind of work. It has evolved quite a bit since then, but we've been using the stages of awareness in one form or another to help us orient ourselves. Again, no matter how long we've been around the conversation, how deeply we've allowed ourselves to dive in and so on. So you've hopefully watched Stages of Awareness 2023, a useful map for our journey together. Then if nothing else, let me see. You know, every one of those other videos or articles have immense value. And especially, I would say, in each of the sections, there's some amount of beauty, collateral beauty. where we've included songs or poetry or sing-along songs or art videos and so on. Hope you find value in those. They are there quite pointedly. And I also hope that you've been coming in with a journal in hand to start to make prompts for yourself for future journaling, just after you've watched a video or during you're watching a video, or conversation prompts. And hopefully you're lucky enough to have some people in your life, some kindred spirits who will join you in the exploration of some of the core points of this course and of this body of work. I wish that for you. It has been something very, very important for me and for virtually every person I know who's engaged with this work. So again, the number one piece, if nothing else, you please listen to written material, Stages of Awareness course context. That's the very first video in that kind of overview section. And then, of course, Stages of Awareness 2023. In section 1, which we covered again in that first week, another welcome to the section, saying a lot about having those journals in hand and really using them, and also setting up conversations with kindred spirits. That will be familiar to you by now. We also did an embodied learning section, which I've intended to put in some amount of embodied learning in every one of the sections of this course, and in so many other elements of other courses we offer here. And this one is Wider Embraces, and you'll find some written context for it. You'll also hear me describe in that first week's Saturday and Tuesday group practice session recordings. You'll hear me, just speak a little bit about Wider Embraces, as subtle as they seem to be, as simple as they seem to be. It's hard to imagine, is this actually making any difference? Why are we doing this? And what I can say is that perhaps by the last session of this course, you'll get a sense how it might be something useful to practice maybe once a week for quite a while. I have found it to be one of the most powerful and gentle instruction tools and direct experience tools for experiencing the energy body, or energy dynamics, energetics dynamics between people and for people in the space. That space is wherever you find comfortable. If what you're aware of is around your body, your aura, if you will. I'm not used to calling things like the aura, but in any case, a personal space, your home space, your town, your job, your relatives, your loved ones, all the way out to your country, the world, and so on. And it gets bigger than that. And so what you will find, hopefully, experientially, with great ease, is a way of being able to shift the proportion of your attention, how narrowly and close in, and perhaps even inside your own body, you take it, or at what level you expand it to include, again, your loved ones, your community, or the world, and out from there. So I'm going to just leave it at that and invite you to start with that embodied learning section number 1, Wider Embraces number 1, coming up in a couple of weeks. If you're starting there a couple of weeks, you'll be bumping into the second and final inclusion of a Wider Embraces practice here in Collateral Beauty. That one will be slightly different, and also has an immense depth as far as I'm concerned. So there you can see the recording session 1 Saturday group practice calls from April 6th. So please look at that if you haven't. And that's the important stuff. If I'm sorry, I just overlooked completely another of the most important sections, excuse me, classes or elements of this section of the Collateral Beauty course, and that is Michael Dowd, The Big Picture, Power of Accepting the Reality of Human-Caused Collapse. This is perhaps the clearest, most concise presentation that Michael Dowd, the late Michael Dowd, did before he died in 2023, and he will be greatly missed, gravely missed by this whole community and beyond for a long time to come. This is an exceptional, concise, clear version of just how inevitable it is that we are in collapse now. And whether that's a popular idea for you or that's an unpopular idea for you, I think it would be immensely valuable for every person who's in any way connected with this collapse-aware reality to hear this presentation and help create a powerful and clear context for this work. So that's it for the really the essential pieces. And of course, every one of these sections, it will be the same that we are recommending highly, that you at your own pace go through and listen to and watch the elements that are meant to be just beauty and inspiring and inspire connection. So I hope you'll do that. So then we're going to do a brief recap on section 2, first aid level resilience skills. And again, these sections more or less are following the steps of Paul Chefurka's stages of awareness, both in the elements, the descriptions that he offers in each. They're simple descriptions. This is not a complex diagram. It is something to help us in a very short order be able to orient ourselves to just how systems aware am I? How aware am I in my direct experience of how connected we all are in this web of life, in this miraculous web of life? That's what's implied by stepping up those stages of awareness through Paul Chefurka's model. And really, the punchline of this course, this Collateral Beauty course, is we are offering a menu of possible practices and resources and support that's appropriate to each level of those stages of awareness. So we hope you will continue with the course and that you will engage. I just had a really sincere and good set of questions from one of the people participating in this round of Collateral Beauty, and they were asking, we're not doing a whole lot of practices yet, and we will do more practices today where we'll actually move our bodies, and you may or may not get out of your chair. But the question was, because in numbers 1 and 2, we actually did very little physically, but that actually matches what I have experienced in my own practices and in many people that I've worked with, that the amount of physical engagement in any kind of practices is non-existent at the first level, the business as usual level, or the level that Paul Chefurka calls dead asleep. So now we're really getting to where there are active practices, and I would recommend highly, well, actually, before we get to 3, I'm jumping ahead, excuse me, just a very brief reminder of in section 2 that we went over last week. And if you've had a chance to do some of these practices, watch the videos or read the articles, then that's fantastic. And again, I hope you're diving into your journal work or conversation work and so on. with Catherine Ingram's Facing Extinction essay, which she reads aloud in that particular section, we recommend that you allow yourself to be moved, allow yourself to really keep scanning your body, your system, and to see what are your reactions when you are able to listen to someone this clear, this sober, this able to spiritually and psycho-spiritually have the capacity to articulate really the condition that we are in at virtually every scale out to the global level, and notice what your reaction is in receiving that kind of even keeled yet piercingly true uh, truth being told, the sober data, as I like to call it. So that is an exceptionally important piece if you have not yet done section 2. The embodied learning there in section 2 is Jack Adam Weber, a dear friend, who is extraordinary at a number of levels of embodied healing, embodied awareness, embodied presence. And he was kind enough to do a very simple layout of a large handful of what I call first aid level resilience skills. So if you, or your neighborhood or your family or wherever you live, your region, if you are subject to any kind of large scale trauma, large scale hurricane, or storm or flood or fire, then you will be quite aware of what I'm talking about with first aid level resilience skills, things to keep you in your body, to be able to return through an anchoring of your breath, making physical contact with yourself, with even leaning against a wall, to be able to return your presence and your awareness to your body so that you might be a bit more present for those you love in a critical or an emergency situation. These are very important skills, especially when obviously you're in the middle of something that's wanting to slam you off center by the sheer scale of it. What I have found, though, is that we're in a very privileged bubble in the USA in particular, and these are skills that we don't feel we need. We don't need them because they're kind of annoying and they're basic, and who cares? But there's nothing more important than this type of skills when the need arises. So again, that's what we requested or suggested that you have as the basics, that if you did nothing other than those were the ones that we suggested last week in section 2. This week we're in section 3, practices beginning level, called Reclaiming Center. Practices for reclaiming center. And very, very briefly, one of the core tenets of this work is that what got us into this global existential predicament is that we've both individually and collectively forfeited our center. We no longer have I'm speaking of generalized, yes, I'm generalizing like crazy across the globe and across all swaths of humanity. If you indeed have reclaimed or always retained your center, if you have massive practices that keep you fully able to reclaim your center from a moment when you've been thrown off, likely you're a martial artist or a fine dancer, or someone, a gymnast who has that physicality. But whatever your lineage, wherever you've learned to do that, those are the skills from starting last week, ones that Jack Adam Weber walks us through in that embodied learning section. Those are the skills that we talked about last week. Those are the ones that I'm hoping those of you who have that skill set, who know what I'm talking about, I'm hoping that you will bring them to future class sections, events that we do live, to the Safe Circle group, so that you can share some of those practices that you have found valuable. There's so much of that in our advanced practices groups, where we exchange practices and we share them with one another and facilitate one another through the direct experience of them. So now, again, that leads us right to this section 3 that we're talking about today. And the embodied practice section, we're going to actually do that in just a moment. I'm just going to take a couple of brief pieces from Stacey Haynes and her work on somatics, and her and the team that she works with, the teams that she works with in that field of somatics, is extraordinary as a way of really orienting ourselves fully, starting from the deepest part of our body, our center. And it's an extraordinary body of work. And again, we'll just do a very, very brief version of her most basic centering practice, which you will see at length with a couple of other exercises with it, practices with it, in that embodied practice, physical centering with Stacey Haynes. You'll also see a talk from Michael Meade, who's a man from the mythopoetic traditions, the soul work traditions. Michael Meade and his talk of the deep self center within. That's exactly what we're talking about at the center. This is his mythopoetic framing for that process of discovering that within ourselves, reclaiming it, and then expanding it. Again, there are many elements of beauty here, the songs, the poetry, there is much. So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment here, get back, and I'm going to now stand up and invite you to do the same if you want to do these things. If you have a chair with a low enough back, you should be able to sit in your chair and do virtually any part of it. All right. All right, so this first one is really just kind of a lighthearted example of how much our body really wants this. It really wants to return to center. It really wants to be moved and stretched and worked out and built up and just used in the best possible way. So if you have the room around you, if you're standing up, fine. If you're sitting in a chair with a low back, so that you can do, because we're going to go around behind us here. So if you hold I'm holding my right hand out with straight arm, and my thumb is up. And I'm now going to go to my right. I'm holding up my right hand and I'm going to my right, and I'm looking straight at my thumb. I'm looking at my thumb. And I'm going, and I find an ending point. That's about it. That's about as far as I can go easily. And so I'm looking at my thumb, and now I'm just checking something behind my thumb that I can see, okay, that's how far I went. So look at that, make a note of that, and then come back. So I'm now looking at my thumb again, and I'm going to go all the way to the left. Still straight arm. Okay, just go as far as you can go. And now ease yourself back. Ease yourself back to the center. And now let's go back to the right. And I'm looking at my thumb, looking at my thumb, looking at my thumb, going as far as I can go. Okay. And I notice as far as I can go. And I'm noticing that I've gone at least a foot more. And I'm coming back now. I'm easing myself back. I noticed that I went at least a foot more than when I started, when I did the first time to the right. Notice what happened for you. If that is also happening for you, which usually it does, it's okay if that didn't happen for you. But if that is what happened for you, it's good to notice. Look how easily your body just wanted to stretch, be able to expand its capacity, and it was pretty effortless. So that's what I noticed. That was a fun thing. Again, I'm putting my feet out wide like this so I can bring my face down so that you can see me. And this is an extremely brief version of the Stacey Haynes centering from her field of somatics, with which she works with many, many individuals and many, many groups as a part of expanding their collective capacities to work together, to be coherent together, to be centered together. So the first thing I'll notice is, this actually is quite a powerful stance in many martial arts. It'll be a wider stance, perhaps not this wide, but, and I'm noticing that just lowering my knees just a couple of inches is quite centering for me. We're looking at our hara just below our belly button and inside our body. That's our hara, our center, our dantian. And that physically is the center that we are talking about when we're talking about center. There are other ways to talk about center for different aspects of who we are. We will get to those in later sections of this course. Right now we're in center, physical center, breath, lowering our center of gravity, perhaps by bending knees just slightly. And now with that breath, I'm both deepening it and slowing it down. Nothing forced. And sometimes I'll just cue how deep I want my breath to go by putting my hand down on my hara. And I can then feel my tummy expands with those deeper breaths now. Whereas before it was not. It was all up here breathing, it was higher breathing. So now I'm cueing both this and an expansion at the belly. And now I'm slowing both my thinking and my speaking. It's deliberate. It also cues me to a very advanced and profoundly centered version of my system, that I can get to quite easily, having done this now for years, hoping that you have similar cues to bring yourself back to center and back to a pace that is extraordinarily nourishing for your centered presence. That doesn't mean that everything has to be slow motion, but it does mean that you are well anchored. You know this pacing. Your body knows its home here in this pacing. You'll find that Stacey Haynes also cues herself. She doesn't actually speak about it, but you'll notice as she's taking you through a much longer, more elaborate centering and body centering set of practices, she is so embodying it, and she is so used to that pacing that works for her to be able to presence that center at a larger and larger scale. You'll notice that, and I would recommend a journal like you see when she is leading the longer version. One thing I'm going to do now, this is a very, very brief uh, embodied uh, practice section for this particular Saturday session that you're watching right now. And again, you will see, and please take on as a daily practice for a while, the practices that Stacey Haynes leads you in that embodied practice section for this week. It is really intended. I know we all have full lives, but to the degree you can make it work for you, if you'll do multiple days of at least once a day or 3 times a week, whatever works for you, to actually do the practices. One thing I'm just going to give you here is something I do often if I'm just standing around or I need a state change in my own body, and I'm lucky enough to be in a place where I have this much room. And what I'll do is just this. It's just I'm cueing myself to my center, and with motion, I'm looking in the same direction that my shoulders are going. Remembering that belly breathing. And it's just easy, nothing forced here. And this is cueing my arms, my shoulders, my diaphragm, of course, my hips and my knees, my ankles, to find more of a fluid motion. Whereas if I'm rushing through my day and I've been busy and I've been in my head and on the screen and kind of anxious, there's very little that will chill me out quicker than this. And notice what I'm doing right now. I'm looking at you on the camera here, and I'm still having that motion go. And I'm gonna take it just a little further, and I'm gonna look the opposite direction of my arms. Simple change, but it's kind of a nice change up, and it's a little bit activating in terms of having to let go of thinking about something in order to do it. Because whenever I try and think about doing that, I can't do it. It's really crazy. So I have to not think about looking the opposite direction of where my shoulders are going, even though it's a tiny movement. Yeah, crazy. All right. So I want to give you a warning now. This is an important threshold in this work. In my experience, again, I've been at this going on 10 years now, and in the past 2 or 3 years, there are now quite a few offerings in the space, especially in what I would call the drop-in support group level of learning about collapse, or learning about climate change, or learning about and being able to work with some part of climate anxiety or climate depression and so on. And I'll just tell you straight up, I'm thrilled that there are so many offerings. And I am also clear that we probably need many more to cover all the different gradations of people's capacity to be present to these extraordinary times. This is not kidding around. This is the most extraordinary and challenging conversation in human history. We are facing an existential global challenge that I personally am not a part of the subgroup at the margins of this conversation called near-term human extinction. That is, that's a radical, and I understand the logic, and I've been in that conversation a lot with people, and I can't land there right now because I think we're too persistent, and I think there will be pockets, especially very privileged pockets, or people who are from a simpler and more close to the land way of living, perhaps indigenous wisdom communities and so on. But especially the privileged, the hyper-privileged pockets of the world will be around for quite a while, no matter what goes on. Basically, what I'm seeing is a big offering, a number of different offerings from a number of different groups. I'm very glad that they're being offered at this first aid level, resilience skills level, this drop-in support group level, to safe places to be able to express some of the more difficult emotions at a very early or basic level. These are important skills and important safe spaces to be creating and holding for people. And what I believe makes our work unique here is that this work stands on the shoulders of that drop-in support group level. For instance, we have a drop-in support group level offering here and have had for 9 years now, called Safe Circle. And Safe Circle happens every Tuesday evening, 6 to 7:30 p.m. Pacific time, and you can find the link to sign up for the invitations for each week and so on down in the show notes. But what those groups, and Safe Circle as well, those groups are not built for is the kind of deeper work, the more challenging work, the more rigorous inner work of collapse that's implied by leaning into a future that includes an incredible amount of loss of biodiversity, of habitat for all the creatures on the planet, including humans, for the absolutely inarguable overshoot that humanity is in now, which is a cornerstone of the whole conversation, for instance, of Michael Dowd's presentation about our current state of an inevitable completion of collapse. So this is really a threshold. This going into section 3 of 6 here in this particular Collateral Beauty course. And perhaps even more importantly, after that, those 6 weeks are just a taste. That just puts our toe in the water together, an introduction to what is the inner work of collapse. And I think what you're going to start to find is perhaps a more vivid picture of where you are on Paul Chefurka's simple scale. There's no shame or no extreme coolness or benefit for being on one level of the stages of awareness or another. It's just what's so. We can't be on a level that we aren't on. It's just not, it's just not what's real. So this is where it starts to get real. It's where we start to really tell the truth about ourselves and our capacity and what we're actually feeling. We become more and more aware of what are the feelings and emotions that we're actually feeling day to day. Perhaps we're keeping a feelings journal so that we can know, and that could be in the context of when you're knocked off center, does that come with a parallel feeling or set of emotions that might also be habitually there. There are other kinds of center that we're looking to reclaim. One of them that's particularly easy to talk about, and I hope you won't mind, you won't be distracted by my use of the word body to describe other aspects of the human experience that we don't usually talk about as a body. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. There's been a really remarkable conversation for quite some time now. Started by, I think it was started by the folks at Rebel Wisdom website and online community that they really did a beautiful job for a number of years, which they have since folded up. But they started us on one of the threads that they started us up on, us being the Collapse-Aware community, is sense making. How do you make sense of the world when it's just feeling insane? So I've become quite fond of talking about the mental body, one part of the human experience, as if it has its own body that is within the physical body, and it also has a center. When we're in that mental center, we could be said to have reclaimed mental center. We are centered if we have sense-making ability, critical thinking ability, sobriety in our thinking. We have agency in our own thinking. These are all elements. These are all elements that constitute a feeling body within our physical body, having center, and us being able to articulate what it's like to have that center and what it's like when we're off center. Does that seem like it might be a useful skill set in the what could be called the public discourse these days? For me, it's desperately needed. So that's why I talk about it in terms of center and its own body. These elements and many more are going to be, we're going to be deepening the distinction of what it is to really come to full body center and to be able to create coherent relationships within a group of people, all of whom are committed to center, to reclaiming their own center, and perhaps even cultivating and curating a group center. And that could be called a sense of coherence in that group. Just what I said, this coherence within an individual system and within a group. These are core elements that I believe are essential skills and capacities needed in this time. So it could be said that we are now starting to articulate some of the skills and capacities and resources called for in facing these challenging predicaments and this time of collapse. Here's a little reminder for the person who asked, we aren't doing any practices yet. I can tell you that from here on, if you were just to do the journaling that's implied in each one of the sections, particularly those core elements that every week I'm suggesting that you would do, that's all the practices that one would really need to have this be foundational, have this course be extremely, hopefully useful for you. It certainly is what has created a foundation for me. That's why we're including what we're including. I'd like to talk to you about a number of types of practice that you're going to experience from here on. The first and most ubiquitous, the most commonly spoken of and offered practice set available on earth today is the contemplative practice, meditation. Um, these quieting, these calming, these cooling practices bring us back to center, give us so many potential benefits. There are innumerable contemplative practices available on YouTube and instruction sets. We do offer a meditation and implicit senses training that you could do in parallel with this course. It is also in our courses menu right here in the Living Resilience online community space. It was just a couple of notches away from the Collateral Beauty course. Whenever you come in and you click on Collateral Beauty, you're just 3 or 4 notches away from the meditation and implicit senses training. This is a whole set of mostly contemplative practices that I put together because learning Vipassana, learning transcendental meditation as I did back in the 70s, it was very difficult for me. That particular kind of meditation that was mostly in my head, mostly no movement in my body, and very little even awareness of my breath and so on, just the most basic level, no dynamics in the breath at all. I really started quite early to curate my own meditation practice, which I hope you will find valuable. Certainly no pressure to it, and no, we are not asking you at all to change or throw out your existing meditation practice. Please stay with what works for you. But I'd be honored if you would give the meditation and implicit senses training a try. Check it out. See some of the distinctions. If you find them useful, fantastic. That to me, right there, talking about the contemplative practices, meditation, and so on, that's as far as I've seen any of the offerings, whether it's from the Climate Psychology Alliance, Climate Psychiatry Alliance, any of the non-treatment oriented, non-psychology oriented providers of various services or courses these days. This is about as much as I see in terms of practices is, again, these self-regulating and co-regulating meditation practices. They're fantastic. It's great. Go for it. There are some other practices I just want to make brief mention of, and we will be offering up examples of a number of them in these coming weeks. Kind of the immediately most obvious next practice we could talk about is the activating practices. If the contemplative practices were on the cooling and calming and settling the body and our system, the activating practices might come in more handy for the people who tend to be on the more depressive or calm or over calm end of the spectrum, in which parts of their system really could use some activation so that they could actually feel a broader range of their feeling body or their energy body or their physical well-being, and they're activating their physical vitality. So there are activating practices, a couple of which are in the meditation and implicit senses training. If you're sparked by this and you'd like to know more, you're certainly welcome to go give them a try. Here's the first of many times you'll probably hear this with all meditations, including the calming meditations. It's very important for you to be able to discern on short order, is this working for my system or is it not? None of these meditations, these practices are intended to be disturbing to you. They are meant to be activating in a very healthy, wholesome way that is within your capacity to do so. It is not meant to be a disturbance of your capacity, and certainly not a diminution or a re-traumatizing that can happen when a person takes on a particular activating uh, practice that is beyond the capacity of their system at that moment. So I'm going to ask you to just start to orient your attention to that. And at the first sign of a disturbance, something uncomfortable, something painful, some really troubling psychological imagery, or some sort of feeling body activation that is not pleasant for you, I would recommend stopping immediately and take care of yourself. And please get in touch with me and us here. Through the contact ways that you know to do, either in the Living Resilience community space, directly messaging, or through the contact information that's in each of these show notes. So, activating practices, contemplative practices, both can be disturbing for people, can cause an emergent impression in our system or regurgitation in our system that can be unpleasant. So again, all that aside, assuming that that's not happening for you, which I hope it's not happening for you, that you will be able to explore what is it to be involved with an ongoing contemplative practice that works for you. You know, there are many people who take that on for the rest of their lives. You don't have to, of course you don't, but you may consider it unless you're already on that path. So bravo. I personally am built for both. I very much enjoy my contemplative practices, and I literally couldn't live without my activating practices. My system really loves that. I really can go deep with an activating practice. And if you want to check out what I'm talking about, you may want to try the what's called dynamic meditation in the meditation and implicit senses training that I was just mentioning. All right. A couple of other types of practices. One is called desaturating practice. This is immensely important because it's my assertion that we are all saturated from the day we're born. There isn't anybody alive today that isn't now fully saturated in this culture, in this self-terminating culture, in this predatory, malicious, and also amazing, profoundly ingenious culture. You know, all the goodies and all the stuff that's taken us down. It's all in there. It's all in us. And we are now 24/7, what I call in a fire hose to the face of constant, too much content and stimulation. I'm really not fond of the expression that's come with the neuroscience community these past few years of we're just not wired for. Well, one thing that I know we are just not wired for is this extraordinary level, this disempowering level, this crippling level of too much content and stimulation for our systems. There is no way to stay centered in that. We are, by definition now, beings without centers. I know that that's a wild assertion, and I know that there will be exceptions. I would look forward to anyone who feels that they are an exception through their practices, through their constitution, whatever. Come on to any of our calls or any of our sharing environments in the Collateral Beauty support group area, and share about, come into the live feed area of the Living Resilience community space and talk to us about how you maintain center with this being this saturated. So we won't be talking right now about desaturating practices, but know that it is an essential element in, especially in our deep practices groups, where we need an advanced level of return to our core sensitivities of being human beings. And we don't get to return to that level of sensitivity without doing some serious desaturating. There are other elements that are not necessarily so easy to talk about just as practices. They're really distinction sets, and they're framings for certain parts of the human experience. And one of them is shadow. Our assertion here is that we are in a world that is propelled almost 100% by shadow. That's what that saturation gets us. That's what living lives without centers gets us, is that shadow, those elements of ourselves that we are not particularly interested in making ourselves aware of, or letting other people know that we have those elements within us. They can be things that we're not proud of, or things that we've never felt good about ourselves, or prejudices we have, or things that we would not easily call on ourselves in a public conversation. I hope you can get just a sense of what can be a part of that shadow that is within each of us. Those suppressed elements, those denied elements in our system will express and do express themselves. They usually express themselves unconsciously and sometimes viciously, to the point of being quite destructive. Quite destructive. So we are committed here to offering a robust conversation space and exploration space and process space for the more in-depth exploration of and self-assessment of shadow. Similarly, with the feeling body, and we do a particular kind of feeling work here to be able to have each person for themselves kind of name and assess, what's my capacity for wholesome, good human expression of, and ability to be in the presence of wholesome, real, authentic feelings in the moment, in myself and in others. And we often start with the four basics of anger, fear, and sadness and joy. This is not the truth about how to work with emotions and feelings. This is not the best way. This is the best way we have discovered. It's very methodical, easy, kind of start easy, and then go to as far as you have capacity to go and interest in going, to be able to know, what does it feel like to have a robust access to wholesome, authentic feelings. One in particular, and this will be the last piece that I'll mention for today, because each of these things I'm just pointing into the future of these next three sections that we're headed toward. And hopefully you'll join us for some more advanced work after that. And that is grief. There are certain elements of the human experience that, while they fit more obviously really in a different topic, or under a different heading. For instance, this could be called a feeling or an emotion, or in the feeling body topic area. But grief seems to have its own part of life. There's another word that I am going to include here, and I'm barely going to get going on it. Is the word soul. And soul is the realm of purpose and meaning and deep, deep relatedness. and so much more. I am not using soul in any religious context. I don't have a religious context, perhaps a spiritual one. I've just never been a fan of organized religious expression. It's just not my thing. So if you're hearing that, I just ask you to just pause on that, and we'll get to a more elaborate discussion about that in later sections. But about grief, there's a particular collective shadow element in the USA and in different countries around the world that I find it very difficult to overstate the presence, the impact and the presence of this shadow element in affecting how we interact with one another, how we relate with one another, how we relate with the animals on this planet, how we relate with Earth herself, with Gaia herself. And that is what is having such a dark and strong impact on us, is our relationship with grief, our relationship with our own shadow, and particularly where those two come together. So just to mention that in a more specific way, it's how we metabolize or how we don't metabolize our grief. It sits completely unmetabolized in our collective stomachs. And as I said before, those elements of shadow that we don't deal with, that we don't bring to the light, that we don't accept and integrate in some way in our direct experience, those will run the show. And they have extremely dark and sometimes existentially destructive consequences of not having been dealt with, metabolized in a good way. For instance, slavery in this country, the genocide and annihilation of countless indigenous cultures and the individuals and tribes and so on. Not to mention, out from there, the corporate and the military and the governmental expressions of the United States up through through this time right now. We aren't good at grieving. We aren't good at acknowledging and processing in any productive way our shadow. These are elements that, at the very least in this work, we can become more aware of. We can become more aware of on a very, very, very small, intimate, personal level. How does shadow affect my relationships that are important to me with my family, my spouse, my neighbors, and so on? And it can also help us to exploring shadow, and those distinctions can help us to understand, to make sense of, in some small way, the literally self-terminating culture that we're living in right now. So thank you for sitting through what was, a lot of talking today. This is longer than we've gone in any of the other Saturday section recordings. And it's only by a few minutes, so I don't feel too bad. I hope it's been useful. I hope it makes sense what I'm talking about, that literally I could not mention one more practice, not one more. And there's enough to transform a life many times over if a person were to dive in. So if that's still not clear, like, what? I didn't run that by me again. I didn't hear it. Then really reach out and send me an email and let's connect up. That's what these practice sessions are for. Notice that there are no live attendees today. So I would invite you to come to any of the remaining Saturdays or Tuesdays. And then after those are done, I would invite you to consider joining us for the really in-depth, uh, deep experiential practice groups called the Community of Practice, or at least come and join us in the Safe Circle calls on Tuesday evenings, Pacific time. And so we can have some conversation. These are live, extraordinarily important conversations. How do I define hope? Where can I find hope? If I'm collapse acceptant, does that mean I have to throw away hope? And that's one active question and conversation that is present right now in the background with myself and a couple of participants in this course. If you have that kind of question going on, please bring them. Bring them. That's what this work is for. So thank you for whatever it is that you're doing to open yourself to this kind of material, and for whatever your reasons are. But I can't help but imagining that it might have something to do with wanting to expand your capacity to be present in the face of larger and larger stressors. And most often that I've heard, and the hundreds of people that I've talked with about this, why would I want to expand my capacity to be present in the face of these larger and larger stressors? Well, so I can be of service to those I love if times get hard. If we have in this area, we had a firestorm 4 years ago here in Southern Oregon where I live. And in 24 hours, 10,000 people were without a home in this relatively small valley community. So it takes something to be present in the face of an event like that. I do not wish any of us that kind of event ever. I really hope and wish for us all to be able to avoid that kind of severe being knocked off center at the community level, at the region level. But I hate to say it, I think we're headed toward times where that will be even more prevalent than it has been for the past 5 years or so. So I hope to see you in these practice sessions. I hope to see you engaged in the coursework. I look forward to any suggestions that you have of perhaps people that you would like to platform into our podcast, the Poetry of Predicament podcast, which is a YouTube channel. If there are experts in any part of the Collapse-Aware, Collapse-Acceptant community that you would like to hear speak, I would be very, very happy to seek them out and interview them. Also, if you have any suggestions for the refinement of the further evolution of the coursework itself, I look forward to your comments. And hopefully get to see you in person, perhaps on a Safe Circle call sometime soon. Thanks so much for joining us in this series, and I look forward to seeing you possibly Tuesday. Bye. Welcome to another recorded live event supporting our most recent Living Resilience Introductory Course, Collateral Beauty. This course, designed to challenge and resource both newcomers and the very experienced in the Collapse-Aware and Collapse-Acceptant communities. Each recording in this series is from either the Saturday or Tuesday online Zoom gatherings intended to deepen an embodied and shared experience of this inner work of collapse in the course called Collateral Beauty.